Lot's wife couldn't help but look back one last time, and in that moment was turned into a pillar of salt.
There are two pillars for Lot's wife, one in Jordan and one in Israel. The Jordanian pillar has a much better shape of a human.
Archaeologists believe they've uncovered the biblical city of Sodom, and what they found buried inside wasn't myth, symbolism, or legend. It was physical evidence of a catastrophe so violent it looks like fire fell from the sky. Today, many of us dismiss this account as religious symbolism, a dramatic moral lesson preserved in the book of Genesis, meant to warn against arrogance and evil. A powerful story, frightening and poetic, but no more than a legend. And yet, the text is clear. Sulfur and fire rained down from heaven, consuming the cities, the entire plain, every inhabitant, and even the vegetation itself. Nothing was spared. Before we dive into the heart of this story, we have a small request. If you're enjoying this journey, a like and a subscription are the best way to support the channel. Thank you. At first, this account sounds like pure myth, a dramatic tale of divine judgment, almost too perfect to be real. But what if this ancient and terrifying text isn't religious symbolism, mysticism, or metaphor at all? What if it's a precise eyewitness-style record of a real astrophysical disaster that struck the Earth around 3,700 years ago? What if what we call God's wrath can be measured, with equations, temperatures, and rates of destruction? Driven by these questions, a multidisciplinary research team led by Dr. Stephen Collins and Dr. Philip Sylvia from Trinity Southwestern University set out to test the story. Archaeologists, geologists, geochemists, medical experts, and astrophysicists joined forces to search for physical evidence. Their destination was Tall El Hammam in Jordan, a massive, ordinary-looking mound hiding the remains of a once great ancient city, sealed beneath layers of earth for millennia. The team began excavations expecting familiar discoveries, broken pottery, animal remains, and stone foundations typical of the region. But at a depth of just over 1.5 meters, everything changed. What they uncovered forced them to put down their brushes and reach instead for dosimeters, magnetometers, electron microscopes, and spectral analyzers, tools not normally associated with archaeology, but essential for understanding what had truly happened there. What the researchers uncovered was a destruction layer unlike anything ever associated with ancient warfare, not the aftermath of a long siege, and not the signature of a typical earthquake. This was ash, but not the soft grey residue left by burning wood or collapsing roofs. It was a dense, hardened black layer fused by extreme heat. Solid stone had liquefied into glass. The soil had boiled and blistered like molten lava. Human bones were not simply broken, they were pulverized into mineral dust and hurled outward by a shockwave so powerful that until modern times, we had only witnessed similar effects at nuclear test sites in places like Nevada or Semipalatinsk. Laboratory tests carried out at 3 independent universities across the world and later published in the highly respected journal Nature Scientific Reports left the scientific community stunned and critics without answers. This was not an earthquake. The ground showed no signs of seismic shaking. It was not a fire set by invading armies. Ordinary fire cannot melt quartz. What the evidence pointed to was something far more extreme, a catastrophic event originating from outer space. We are now stepping into a detailed investigation of one of the most chilling and enigmatic cold cases in human history. Together, we will reconstruct the event moment by moment, temperature by temperature, the day the sky quite literally fell to earth, turning what was once described as the Garden of Eden into a scorched and deadly wasteland. To grasp the true, unimaginable scale of this disaster, we must first understand what was lost. Tall El Hammam was not a forgotten shepherd's village or a temporary nomadic settlement. It was the Bronze Age equivalent of New York or London, a massive, powerful city, even more formidable than Jericho or Jerusalem. 15 years of excavation have revealed an enormous, highly sophisticated defensive system, carefully engineered to protect one of the greatest urban centres of its time. The city was protected by an immense outer wall, 4 metres thick and rising as high as 15 metres. Built from millions of sun-dried mud bricks, the fortifications were reinforced with towers, bastions, and sloping earthen ramparts designed to stop battering rams and invading armies. Behind these walls lived thousands of prosperous citizens, wealthy merchants, master craftsmen, influential priests, and trained warriors. This was no ordinary settlement. It was a powerful commercial and administrative hub, controlling the Jordan River's water sources and the main trade artery linking Egypt with Mesopotamia. Its influence stretched across the entire southern Jordan Rift. By size and population, it was 10, possibly 15, times larger than Jerusalem at the time. It was a true regional superpower, a thriving center of Bronze Age civilization. And then, without warning, it ended. Around 1650 BC, over a span of less than 50 years, as confirmed by radiocarbon dating from hundreds of samples, life here simply stopped. The city did not fade away due to drought or economic collapse. It was not destroyed by war. Instead, it vanished abruptly at the height of its power. As archaeologists carefully peeled back the layers of soil metre by metre, they encountered something deeply unsettling, a sudden empty stretch of history. Scholars refer to this as the Bronze Age gap. After 1650 BC, this land, the most fertile, water-rich and livable region in the area, was completely abandoned. Not for a few years, not for a decade. It lay silent for 600 years. For 6 centuries, there were no new buildings, no hearth fires, no shepherds, no pottery shards, nothing. Nearby mountain communities avoided the site entirely, as if it were cursed, as if something unspeakable had happened there. Why would people abandon such a paradise, where water flowed freely and the finest barley thrived? What terror was so profound that its memory survived across 20 generations? The answer was buried beneath a layer roughly 1.5 meters thick, a dark band of ash, charcoal and debris. This was the destruction layer, a smooth, oily-looking streak in the soil that, even after thousands of years, still carries the scent of smoke, salt and death. Within this layer, scientists discovered evidence that simply did not fit with any known ancient technology. As excavations continued, the first clues came from the pottery. Tens of thousands, even millions, of fragments from jugs, plates, and massive grain storage vessels. But these shards looked wrong, twisted, deformed, unnatural, and deeply unsettling. Under normal circumstances, Bronze Age pottery is nothing more than clay hardened in a kiln. But these fragments were different. Many had fused together. On one side, their surfaces had transformed into a slick greenish glass. Some pieces were swollen with bubbles and warped bulges, as if the clay had boiled like soup on a stove, then frozen instantly in a single, violent moment. The scientists were stunned. Samples were rushed to laboratories for thermal testing, and the results were chilling. To turn this specific clay, with its unique chemical makeup, into this glass, known as trinitite, requires temperatures of at least 1,000 degrees Celsius. And that was only the beginning. In samples of mortar, plaster and bricks, researchers discovered microscopic zircon crystals. Zircon is an exceptionally stable mineral, so heat-resistant that it's used today in nuclear reactors. Yet analysis revealed that these ancient crystals had actually boiled. Their internal structure collapsed, transforming into another mineral called baddelite, a process that only occurs at temperatures exceeding 2,000 degrees Celsius. Pause for a moment and let those numbers sink in. Even the most intense ancient city fires, fueled by wood, straw, oil and cloth, reached no more than 800 to 900 degrees Celsius. Specialized ceramic kilns of the Bronze Age, driven by bellows, could reach roughly 1,100 degrees. But 2,000 degrees? Where could heat like that possibly come from? On Earth's surface, temperatures this extreme occur under only two conditions: at the center of a nuclear explosion or during the atmospheric impact of a large celestial object traveling at hypersonic speed. No forest fire, no wildfire, no volcano, which didn't exist in this region, and no invading army armed with torches or incendiaries could generate enough heat to melt stone, clay bricks, metal, and pottery until they flowed like liquid and turned into glass. The trinitite fragments found at the site, sand fused into glass, were chemically and visually strikingly similar to material discovered at the Alamogordo test site in New Mexico after the world's first atomic bomb detonation known as the Trinity test. The implication was undeniable. This city wasn't burned by ordinary fire. It was blasted by an intense thermal pulse. A wave of plasma so powerful it mimicked the effects of a miniature sun descending to Earth. As archaeologists began clearing the foundations of the surviving walls, towers, and palace complex, another disturbing pattern emerged. The destruction followed a precise mathematical direction. The walls hadn't simply collapsed or crumbled randomly, as they would in an earthquake. They were sliced, shattered, and shoved off their foundations. Everywhere they looked, the evidence pointed the same way. Broken walls, shattered pottery, collapsed wooden beams, even human remains, all were aligned along a single axis, stretching from southwest to northeast. This is a textbook signature of a directional explosion. The shockwave had come from the southwest, from the northern edge of the Dead Sea. The blast struck the city with unimaginable speed. The upper sections of the brick walls, towering 15 meters high and considered masterpieces of Bronze Age engineering, disintegrated instantly. They collapsed into fine red dust and were carried by the wind for kilometers. Even the 4-meter-thick defensive walls, built over generations and believed to be unstoppable by any army, were erased in a single moment. Their remains were scattered across the valley for hundreds of meters, smeared across the landscape like butter spread on bread. The main palace, the tallest, strongest structure in the city, a multi-story fortress crowning a hill, was torn down to its stone foundations. Everything above simply disappeared. When scientists compared the evidence with modern data from nuclear weapons tests, industrial explosions, and meteorite impacts, the similarities were unsettling. The pattern matched what experts call an airburst, an explosion that occurs in the atmosphere rather than on the ground. The closest historical comparison is the 1908 Tunguska event in Siberia, where a cosmic explosion flattened forests across more than 2,000 square kilometers. But this ancient blast was even more powerful and far more devastating because it occurred much closer to the ground and directly over a densely populated city. Computer simulations revealed that the object never struck the Earth. No impact crater exists, and despite years of searching, none has ever been found. Instead, a cosmic body, possibly a fragment of a comet, an icy mass, or a loosely bound rocky asteroid, entered the atmosphere at a shallow angle. Unable to survive the intense pressure and friction, it detonated in midair roughly 4 kilometers above the surface. The estimated energy release, 10 to 15 megatons. That's about 1,000 times more powerful than the atomic bomb dropped on Hiroshima. Imagine Hiroshima in the Bronze Age. Skeptics pushed back. Critics suggested alternative explanations: a massive natural gas eruption, an exotic lightning phenomenon, or an earthquake that sparked widespread fires. But geologists produced a final piece of evidence, something impossible to fake or reinterpret: shocked quartz. Quartz is one of the most common and hardest minerals on Earth. Its crystal structure is remarkably stable. To deform it, to fracture its internal lattice, requires pressures measured in gigapascals, equivalent to millions of atmospheres. In nature, such pressure occurs only in 2 scenarios: deep within the Earth's mantle or during the hypersonic impact of a celestial object. No volcano, no earthquake, no fire can generate that kind of pressure at the surface. Under a scanning electron microscope, scientists identified quartz grains from Tall El Hammam marked by microscopic cracks and distinctive planar deformations. the unmistakable fingerprint of a cosmic shockwave. PDFs, planar deformation features, were discovered inside the quartz crystals. These are microscopic crossing lines etched into the crystal lattice itself. They are the unmistakable fingerprint of an asteroid impact, a cosmic signature that cannot be forged or misunderstood. But the evidence didn't stop there. Within the destruction layer, scientists also found countless microscopic spheres known as spherules. These form when metals vaporize and then rapidly cool while flying through the air. The spherules contained iron and silicon, along with platinum, iridium, osmium, and palladium. On Earth's surface, platinum and iridium are extraordinarily rare, but in meteorites, they are common. In the layer dated to around 1650 BC, their concentrations were staggering, tens to hundreds of times higher than normal background levels. And then came the final, devastating proof: nanodiamonds. These are tiny diamonds, invisible to the naked eye, formed almost instantly from ordinary organic carbon, wood, plants, human tissue, clothing, when exposed to extreme pressure and heat. The ash layer at Tall El Hammam is saturated with them. This wasn't symbolic language. These were living things, compressed into diamond dust by the force of a cosmic hammer. Diamonds born from destruction. Yet the most haunting discovery wasn't the glass, the metals, or even the diamonds. It was the people. Archaeologists uncovered the remains of the city's inhabitants, but not as intact skeletons frozen in moments of daily life, like those at Pompeii or Herculaneum, gently buried by volcanic ash. These were fragments, pieces of human lives. Bones scattered chaotically throughout the destruction layer, shattered into tiny fragments and mixed with brick debris, charcoal, melted glass, and rubble. Forensic analysis revealed signs of unimaginable trauma. Joints were twisted beyond natural limits, arms and legs bent backward in extreme hyperextension. Some bones were scorched, but only on one side, the side facing the blast. These are the unmistakable marks of a shockwave, moving many times faster than the speed of sound. People standing watch on the walls, guards on lookout, families sleeping on flat rooftops to escape the stifling valley heat. They were caught instantly. The blast tore them apart. A hurricane-force wind, packed with superheated sand, stones, and ceramic fragments, swept through the city like a colossal sandblaster. Flesh was stripped from bone. Skeletons were ground into dust. Death came faster than the brain could register pain. Faster than fear. Faster than a scream. They didn't suffer. They simply ceased to exist. Vaporized into ash in a single moment. Only 2 skeletons were found largely intact. They had been hiding behind a thick stone wall, downwind, in the shadow of the blast. Buried beneath collapsed masonry, their bones remained mostly whole. Their posture tells a chilling story. Curled tightly on the ground, hands covering their faces, like unborn children. They saw the flash, a light brighter than 1,000 suns. A blinding white glow that arrived seconds before the sound and the impact. It was the last thing they ever saw. But one question still remained. Why did no one return? After wars, plagues, or earthquakes, survivors usually come back. The rubble is cleared. The city is rebuilt. The location was perfect. Fertile land, abundant water. So why did Tall El Hammam and the entire surrounding region remain empty for 600 years? The answer was hidden in the soil. Chemical analysis of the destruction layer revealed extreme concentrations of toxic salts and sulfates. The salinity measured between 6 and 8%, compared to less than 1% in the layers above and below. The airburst occurred near the northern edge of the Dead Sea. The shockwave was so powerful that it forced the lake's waters downward, then blasted vast amounts of superheated saltwater, steam, bitumen, and anhydrite into the atmosphere. What followed was a salt tsunami, a boiling rain of salt that blanketed the fertile valley. The land was poisoned. Crops could no longer grow. Water sources became undrinkable. What had once been one of the most prosperous regions on Earth was transformed into a dead zone, and it would remain that way for centuries. The land itself had become poisonous. Salt levels in the soil reached concentrations deadly to the primary crops of the time: wheat, barley, and other staple grains. Farming was no longer possible. Nothing could grow. Plant roots were burned on contact. The ground turned grey, scorched, and crusted with salt. Seeds could not be planted. Crops could not survive. Not even grass would take hold. This isn't modern interpretation. It's a direct description from the Book of Deuteronomy. And what's chilling is how closely it matches the results of modern chemical analysis from Tel El Hammam. Word for word, it describes the same dead, salt-saturated landscape. The ancient writer wasn't speaking in metaphor. He was recording what he had actually seen, a lifeless plain poisoned beyond recovery. It took 600 years for occasional seasonal rains in this arid region to slowly wash the salt from the topsoil. 6 centuries before agriculture could return. 6 centuries of silence, of abandonment, of desolation. That is why an advanced civilization vanished from the map almost overnight and stayed gone for generations. Using excavation evidence, computer simulations, and nuclear physics equations, researchers can now reconstruct the sequence of that day with astonishing precision. It is around 1650 BC. It begins as an ordinary morning, warm and humid. The city is waking up. Farmers head toward the fields. Merchants open their shops. Priests prepare for morning rituals. Above them, the sky is clear, blue, and cloudless. Then, suddenly, something appears in the southwestern sky, rising from the direction of the Dead Sea. It enters at an angle of about 35 degrees to the horizon, traveling at roughly 60,000 to 70,000 kilometers per hour. It is brighter than the sun, a blazing object tearing across the sky, leaving behind a fiery smoking trail that seems to split the heavens in two. At an altitude of about 4 kilometers above the ground, the object can no longer withstand the crushing pressure of the atmosphere. It detonates. A blinding flash erupts, lasting less than a heartbeat. Instantly, intense thermal radiation floods the city. Any surface facing the blast is heated to over 2,000 degrees Celsius. Clothing ignites. Wood bursts into flame. Hair and skin combust. Water in open vessels boils violently and turns to steam. Eyes turned toward the sky are destroyed in an instant. The outer layers of clay bricks and ceramics begin to melt, flowing into glass. Birds in flight are incinerated mid-air. 3 seconds later, the shockwave arrives. Invisible, unstoppable. A wall of compressed air moving faster than sound itself. It slams into the city walls. Bricks disintegrate into dust. Palaces collapse like houses of cards. People are ripped from where they stand and hurled against stone with lethal force. Bodies are torn apart. Within seconds, trees are uprooted. And then comes something even stranger. Behind the shockwave forms a zone of deep vacuum, empty space. Air rushes back toward the epicenter, sucked inward toward the rising mushroom cloud above what was once a thriving city. The sky has fallen. Buildings that somehow survived the initial blast were then torn apart from the inside as the pressure suddenly reversed. For nearly a full minute, debris rained down from the sky. Glowing rocks, droplets of molten metal, burning ash, and worst of all, caustic brine formed from the vaporized waters of the Dead Sea. The ruins were blanketed in a scorching layer of salt and ash. Secondary fires ignited everywhere. Within an hour, the city no longer existed. In its place lay a smoking, glassy wasteland, bleached white with salt. A massive column of dust and smoke rose into the sky, visible from hundreds of kilometers away, like smoke pouring from a giant furnace. Nearby settlements were not spared, but they survived. Jericho, about 20 kilometers west beyond the hills, suffered damage. Walls collapsed, fires broke out, yet the city was not annihilated by the heat. These were the witnesses, the people of Jericho. Shepherds on distant ridges, figures like the biblical Abraham, watching the valley as smoke rose from the land. The story of Sodom and Gomorrah was not born from religious hysteria or imagination. It was a deep, traumatic memory, witnessed, survived, and passed down through generations. Those on the fringes of the devastation saw it with their own eyes. Fire from the sky, blinding light, plasma. A mushroom cloud rising from the earth, smoke billowing like from a furnace. And then there is the story of Lot's wife, turned into a pillar of salt. With the discovery of a massive saltwater eruption from the Dead Sea, this account takes on a terrifyingly literal meaning. A person caught in a blast of superheated salt vapor, ash, and anhydrite would die instantly from suffocation and thermal shock, then be encased in a hard, white mineral crust. The body would stiffen, harden, and appear statue-like. Archaeologists have not found an intact salt statue. Centuries of rain would dissolve it. But the physical conditions required for such a death unquestionably existed. The name of the city matters. In the Bible, it is called Sodom. Today, the site is known as Tal el-Hammam in modern-day Jordan. And the geographic description given in the book of Genesis matches this location precisely. The region is described as the Kikar, a fertile plain rich in water, visible from the hills near Bethel and Ai. Tal el-Hammam is the only major city in this area that was destroyed during the Middle Bronze Age. The time, the place, the method of destruction. They align with over 99.9% accuracy. In science, it is extraordinarily rare for archaeology and physics not to contradict ancient religious texts, but to explain them. What was once called a miracle turns out to have been a rare astrophysical event. God's wrath was, in physical terms, the kinetic energy of a falling asteroid. Ancient people described what they saw using the language they had. They called it God, because they did not yet have a word for asteroid. The discoveries at Tal el-Hammam didn't just confirm an ancient story, they delivered a warning. We still live on the same planet. We orbit in the same cosmic shooting gallery, surrounded by fast-moving rocks. Chelyabinsk in 2013 was a warning. Tunguska in 1908 was a warning. Sodom was a brutal lesson we have forgotten. Objects of this size, roughly 57 meters across, strike Earth only once every few thousand years. Rare by human standards, but inevitable on cosmic timescales. And if such an explosion occurred today over a modern city, New York, London, Tokyo, Moscow, the outcome would be the same. Molten glass, vanished skyscrapers, vaporized bridges, and millions of lives reduced to ash in a single second. No missile defense system can stop a rock traveling at 60,000 kilometers per hour. We fear nuclear weapons, pandemics, and climate collapse. But archaeologists, brushing glass shards from the sands of Jordan, remind us that the greatest danger often arrives without warning. No politics, no declarations of war. Just physics. Just energy. Tal el-Hammam stands today as a monument to the fragility of civilization. We build walls, we build empires, we write laws, gather wealth, and pray. Yet a single stone from the cold, silent void of space can reduce it all to a layer of black ash. And a story future generations may struggle to believe. These excavations have reshaped how we understand history. They show that ancient stories are often encrypted records of real catastrophes. And now that we know what to look for, trinitite, shocked quartz, platinum, nanodiamonds, scientists are asking a chilling question. How many more ancient cities were erased by impacts from the sky? How many more Sodoms are still buried beneath the earth? Atlantis, Mohenjo-Daro, cities with vitrified stone and unanswered questions. The findings from Tal el-Hammam were published in September 2021 in the prestigious journal Nature Scientific Reports. This is no conspiracy theory, no sermon. It is established science, verified by geologists, geochemists, archaeologists, and medical researchers. The Sodom of the Bible has been found, and it was destroyed by fire from the sky. And unless we learn to look upward, one day we may be next. Thank you to everyone who watched this episode. Your support truly matters. Please like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell so you never miss our future investigations.